So welcome to the North Carolina Aquatic Data Hub's webinar on Introduction to Water Quality Data Management using the North Carolina Aquatic Data Hub's database. So we're going to cover some interesting topics today. Overview of how you use water quality monitoring data, tools to manage that data. We have a case use from the Haw River Assembly on data management. They've done a great job with their monitoring efforts. We have an introduction to the Aquatic Data Hub's database as a tool and how you can use that for your organization. And then we'll round out with EPA water quality tools. So really excited about that. Like I said, we are recording this and it will be available for viewing later. Our initial webinar held last month was an introduction to water quality monitoring, and that one will also be available on our Aquatic Data Hub website, and we'll share that link in the chat. Pretty much any tools that we develop as a collaborative will be posted on that website, which is housed on the Water Resource Research Institute's web pages. So we will have Adam Griggs with EPA. Adam's been with us from the early beginnings of the Aquatic Data Hub. We've been around for almost 10 years. Yeah. And then we'll have Caitlin Elliott with the Haw River Assembly talking about their data management. We'll have time for questions. Certainly, if you have any questions that come up as we go, feel free to drop it in the chat or raise your hand or speak up. It's a small group, so we're happy to hear from you. So George Santucci with the town of Boone will be talking about the Aquatic Data Hub database and has used that in the past and is very familiar with it. And then we'll round out again with Adam talking about EPA's water quality tools to help you manage and use your data. I'm going to ask my co-host here, did I miss anything? Did I get everything? I think we're probably good. All right. All right, Adam, I'm going to turn it over to you now, and we'll look forward to hearing from you.
All right, everyone hearing me okay and seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Quick caveat, this is my third presentation this week on a different topic. So these slides came together a little late. So apologies if anything seems a little disjointed. I'll probably go a little bit long on my first intro section overall on data management. And then because last month we covered the EPA tools pretty well, so I'm going to go pretty light on that at the end with whatever time's left today. But real quick, this is what I'm
recording anyway. So yeah.
Say that again, I'm sorry. It's being recorded now? Okay.
Yeah, I think if folks will just mute themselves, that way we can hear Adam. Thanks.
All right, so quick intro to what we're going to be covering today. I'll run over some regional data management considerations because that's ultimately what we're here. We're talking about how we can manage the data being collected across North Carolina. And then some individual program data management considerations because not all of our programs are the same, and everyone's in a different place with different goals, different resources, and there's plenty of different ways to manage data. So which one's going to work best for you? We'll go into some data management best practices and then look at potential data flows in North Carolina. And then when I come back at the end, we'll talk about WQX and Water Quality Portal. So down here at the bottom is kind of the life cycle of data. This should be kind of familiar to most of you. This is what all of us have to go through to be able to go out there and collect meaningful, useful data, and then ultimately get some kind of use out of that. Even if it's just educating our monitors into what watershed monitoring is about, or if you're using it for your own purposes in your organization to guide your restoration work, or just generally trying to share that data with others or communicate the science and what you found in your monitoring. You're not going to be able to accomplish those goals unless you're able to properly manage your data, because you can't just go into a public meeting and waving your field sheets around, and that's not going to work. You have to have your data in a certain format so that you can use it. And unless you're really old school and you're hand calculating statistics or you're hand drawing charts, you're probably using a program. And those programs have specific requirements for what that data is going to look like for them to be able to make sense of it. And so that's what we're going to be kind of focusing on. What are those formats? How do you get data into a shape so that it can become a tool that produces information? So regionally, all data has value across this region, but documented data has more. So, and shared data has more. So the more that we can document the data that you guys are collecting and get that shared into folks, partners of ours that might be able to make use of that data, decision makers, the public in general, for informing them about the water resources, the more value the data that you collect is going to have. Now, we're going to hear a couple of examples today, and generally monitoring programs can have a huge range from very simple, kind of let's just get people in the field and introduce them to stream monitoring, to incredibly complex scientific studies of water resources. And the data management that is required for those varying degrees of programs is similarly ranges from simple to complex. So programs should be able to kind of figure out a path that's going to make the most sense for their program, and then set themselves on that data management path to make sure that they're going to get to their data use goals. And so setting those goals at the onset can really help guide program development. And again, sharing the data is going to increase not only its utility, but also the longevity. We'll see if you can get these data into a system like the Water Quality Portal that's going to have posterity and protection for that data. So that you can make sure it's never lost for your program, or down the road. We got to think about the folks that are coming after us. Are we going to leave that data in good shape for them to be able to use it and look back on where the waters have been? And then regionally, can we build shared data management resources? So we don't want everyone, all the different groups on the ground, doing this completely on their own and reinventing the wheel. Ultimately, we're collecting similar information we'd like to be able to pull together and look at all together. So that means that somewhere along the way, we should be able to help each other manage that data on the way up. So we're going to look at some shared data management resources available in the state as well. For your goals, again, there's probably as many ways to manage water data as there are to collect it. So you really need to figure out what the goals are for your program and to get a sense of what system is going to work best for you. There's all sorts of questions you want to be considering. As you do this, think about what are the data sets that you produce. You might be producing a couple different kinds: lab reports, logger files, field forms, biological counts. Do you need to be able to marry these data sets together so that you can ask questions across them? If so, that's a major consideration and a major effort to integrate different data sets. So that might send you in one direction or another on to how you're going to try to manage that data. Metadata, do you need to manage and report it? So what is metadata? Well, the data that we collect is kind of dissolved oxygen, 9 milligrams per liter. The metadata is okay. It was in micrograms per liter, milligrams per liter. We used a YSI meter to collect that, and it was last calibrated the morning before we went out. So that metadata about how you collected that dissolved oxygen reading is going to give somebody else a lot more confidence in being able to use that. So if you want to share data with somebody and have them have confidence in using it, they're probably going to need your metadata as well. And so if you have to manage metadata along the way, that's going to be a big data management consideration for your program and maybe send you into one or of another path. What resources do you have available? Not everyone has talented data management staff on hand or plenty of resources to throw at buying some fancy database. So you're going to have to figure out what resources are available to you in your program, and try to make sure that you're meeting those resources and your goals. And if you can't meet your goals with your resources, you might have to pare some of those goals back or find more resources, as we always have to do. Ultimately, you consider putting together a data management plan. That's what's going to help you think through all of these things, put it all down on paper, and leave something for the next person to be able to follow to make sure that this data is all getting properly managed. Okay, so standardized data formats. I mentioned in the front end that unless you're doing something completely by hand, you're probably relying on some kind of program to make sense of your data, turn it into nice charts and graphs, or do statistical analysis on that. And that means your data is going to have to be in a certain standardized format for those types of programs to be able to make sense of them. So there's kind of two main formats that are out there, and your data should try to get into one of these two formats at least. This first one is a matrix style data set, also known as kind of flat or wide or tidy. This format's probably familiar to you. Every row is a different day's observation. Every column is a different parameter that you're measuring. And then in the cells, you're storing those values, those measurements that you collected. And so this format is all about the numbers, right? Where we want to store the data, and it's very handy for doing analysis and comparing different constituent parameters that live in those different columns. But it's not necessarily the best way to manage your data, especially if you have to manage metadata, because there's no metadata fitting into this table the way that it is. But this is a great format. We can still work with this to upload this to systems like WQX. We'll look at some examples like that in the future. And again, this is ready to go for a lot of analysis. So this is tidy data, and we'll see a couple of examples today. Later, we'll see an example coming from a Google Sheet. If you're importing your data into a Google Sheet and it's putting it or a Google Form and it's putting it into a Google Sheet, it's putting it into this tidy format all automatically. So. The other main format out there, and this is the format that's really better for storing data, and this is the format that we ultimately store data in the Aquatic Hub database and in WQX Water Quality Portal, and I'm sure the same way that the data is being stored at the state on their data system as well. So this is what we call kind of a stacked style data set, or a tall data set. And in this situation, all of the different parameters that you're measuring, their field names all end up in one column. Next to them is going to be their measure value. And then next to them, we can keep adding columns of additional metadata that explain exactly how those measurements were derived. So it's a different style, but you can fit a lot more data into this style. But it's also not as handy for making those nice charts and doing analysis, comparing parameters. So this is a great way for storing information, and ultimately the format that data will need to be in for either the North Carolina Aquatic Hub database or getting data into WQX. Some non-standard data formats that you might want to avoid, and I see these all the time. For instance, on the right, I've seen examples where someone sets up a different block on their spreadsheet for each site, and they put all the observations for each site into a block. Well, when it comes time to analyze that, it might make Excel charts a little easier, but you're not going to be able to share that with any other system or program, make maps of that information. It's not going to be able to understand those column breaks. Similarly, on the left-hand side, you see an example of maybe every month's measurements were put into a different tab. Again, you're breaking up the data unnecessarily. That's going to make it harder for you to answer questions across time or across stations. And so avoid formats that unnecessarily break up your data that way. Other things to avoid, you want to make sure that the data within the cells themselves is also standardized. What that means is no shorthand or slight changes in any data elements format. Don't tolerate one of your field crew puts dates in with slashes and the other one uses dashes, right? That's something you're going to have to fix later if they don't get to a convention in the way that they're entering that. Or slight changes in site IDs. The IDs themselves, very, very important. Whenever someone gets ready to kind of up their data management game and share that data to WQX, a lot of times they have a lot of work to do to go back in time and fix every year. Somebody wrote down the ID a little bit differently. We all know which site it was. We all know what it meant, but the ID has changed. And so those kinds of things you want to avoid as well. And then things like putting non-numeric characters into numeric fields, that's just going to cause you trouble later when it's time to analyze the information. So let's talk about the advantages of some of these different technologies that you can adopt for data management. The first one, very familiar to you guys, is going to be spreadsheets, right? Almost everyone starts off managing data in an Excel table, and that's a perfectly fine way to manage data and to use data. But ultimately, you're really managing data sets that way, one spreadsheet at a time, one data set. Not very useful for, say, manipulating or analyzing, organizing data in a relational way. You don't have a lot of controls on that information. It's a hard way to store metadata about other aspects of your program. So say if you want to store detailed information about your stations, you can't really have that in the same spreadsheet that all your data is living in. So spreadsheets are really, again, useful for managing data sets, but not necessarily managing the data of your entire program. A relational database, on the other hand, is basically when we take those different tables of information and we build relationships between them. Now we can manage different types of data, say the information about your stations, with the information that you collected at those stations. So you can have detailed information about the site, what kind of site it is, who's the landowner, how do you access it, what's the upstream watershed, what kind of land cover do we have in that watershed upstream of that site. So detailed information about the site, but that's not in your data set with the results. But since there's a relationship between them, we can ask questions now about, say, different sites with different profiles, ones that have riparian buffers and ones that don't, for example. So you can also manage the integrity of the data when it's in these relational databases. You can set rules and checks on the information. You can also build front-end forms on them. You can query and ask information across different filters or characteristics. And so it's just a stronger way of managing your data. And typically we're talking about kind of MS Access, Microsoft Access, and that's the system that the Aquatic Data Hub was built in. So I consider the Aquatic Data Hub to be a light relational database. They do get more complicated. So what's a heavy, I guess I should say, is kind of the enterprise level databases. And those are ones that you might buy off the shelf. These can come at considerable cost and they have a lot of customized functionality. That's the kind of system that the state agencies are going to be going out and having to procure to manage all the data across their programs, but probably too much for somebody that's not of that size. So again, what do we mean by relational? These different tables are connected with different relationships. So this is exactly how we store data in WQX. Everything is under one organizational account. That organizational account will register different projects and information about those projects in different locations and different information about those locations. And then ultimately they upload a table of results that include the org ID, the project ID, and the location ID, so that we can tie it back to those three other tables of detailed information. And so when we store the data this way, we have a lot of consistency. We have a lot of protection for the data. There's no confusing locations. There's no confusing projects or who the data belongs to. These are the enterprise level databases. Again, they often live, we're talking about Oracle or SQL Server or something in the cloud. These are typically customized with front ends and can be very expensive. So how do you select a data management tool? These are some of the different functions that they might provide for you. So particularly if you need to manage metadata, say that you have 2 or 3 different pieces of equipment or different field crews, and every day when somebody goes out and measures dissolved oxygen, we need to know what piece of equipment it was that measured that day's sample. Then you need to manage metadata. And you're probably going to need to be doing that in something beyond a spreadsheet, like the North Carolina Aquatic Data Hub relational database, or you're going to have to be setting up some flows to WQX to properly manage those different data sets, or you might be investing in an enterprise level database. Consider your costs, consider the expertise that's required, consider how many users that you have. Does only one person need to get into this thing? If so, then you can probably run something like Aquatic Data Hub. But if you have 8 different users that need to get in there at any one time, then that might not be a system that's going to work for you. So these are some of the things you might want to consider when selecting a data management tool. And then my last slide in this intro is kind of to set up some of the talks that we have here. In North Carolina, we're kind of setting up a few different ways to share data up with the state or up to WQX and the Federal Water Quality Portal. And you're going to think about, all right, which of these is going to work for us. So not only which piece of equipment are you going to be able to use, a relational database, an enterprise, or just spreadsheets, but also what are your goals? So if your goals are to share the data with CAM in North Carolina so that they can use it appropriately. Or you do have the separate goal of getting it all the way up to the water quality portal so that share with the public, or maybe you're interested in taking advantage of all the data management capabilities that having your data in the portal can provide, because now you have database in the cloud. There are a couple different paths here. We're going to hear about a DIY path. So that's you completely managing your own data. It's going to require, significant organizational resources, often, a talented person on staff, or some dedicated resources to hire a developer if you're going to manage that DIY path. And again, if you do, if you find yourself lucky enough to have that talented person on staff who we're going to hear an example for the hall, been able to go back and get all the past historical data into really great shape and start making sense of it and turning it into information. At that same time, you might want to set the goal of going ahead and getting that data shared somewhere, because the next person that comes in, when that unicorn moves on, might not be able to pick up where they left off with the tools that they built on their own DIY path. But if you get onto either like the North Carolina Data Hub path or WQX path, you're going to have shared resources, shared training available, so that somebody can step in and pick up where they left off. The NCADH database is going to be able to spit out the North Carolina template that North Carolina wants to see data shared in, or it's going to be able to spit out the templates that go into WQX. So that gives you a couple different options there. And then finally, that WQX path, maybe you don't have anyone that can handle DIY, and maybe the North Carolina Aquatic Data Hub database is just too much for you. You don't really need to manage the metadata that way. Then we can talk about how you can either adopt the WQX templates to share data easily, or reach out to us for support to develop a custom data flow in the WQX web app that recognizes and maps your data and gets it onboarded. And so once you have that set up one time, that's easy to keep doing. So those are kind of the three different paths that are going to help you organize data and get it shared up with other data users besides yourself and your program. And so that's kind of the intro. And I will turn it over to our next speaker unless there's time for a question.
Is there a question anyone wants to raise right now before we move on? I think people are absorbing. So thank you so much, Adam. That was very informative. And if you want to stop sharing your screen, then
I'm trying. I've lost all
Oh,
control.
yeah, there's a button somewhere there.
I'm a Teams user now.
Oh,
There we go.
yeah.
Yep. There we go.
Thank you so much. Great. So now we are going to move on to a case use study with Caitlin Elliott. Caitlin, I see your screen, and I think we're good to go.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So, hey everyone, my name is Caitlin Elliott, and I'm the Water Quality Program Manager for the Haw River Assembly. As an organization, we work to ensure a healthier watershed, and in my position, I go out, I take samples, I manage our data, and I analyze it, and I visualize it. So I'm just going to go over some of the programs that we have. So we monitor for a wide range of parameters and try to get a more complete understanding of the health of our waterways. We also look to fill data gaps, both temporally and spatially. So we look to see where the state and the USGS have not monitored before, or where there could be more updated data. We also monitor known pollution sources, for example, downstream of wastewater treatment plant outfalls. We have a few different programs that we use. First is our River Watch program, which you heard a little bit about in the last workshop. This program is our volunteer stream monitoring. Volunteers collect, identify aquatic macroinvertebrates, and calculate a macroinvertebrate index score. They also note habitat characteristics such as pH, water, and water transparency, water temperature. Our swim guide program goes from Memorial Day to Labor Day each year, and we monitor at a number of popular recreation sites along the Haw River and at Jordan Lake for E. coli. During this weekly monitoring, we also use our YSI meter to take pH, water temperature, dissolved oxygen, and conductivity measurements. And then for our fecal and CAFO monitoring, this includes both E. coli monitoring using the IDEX system that we can do in-house, and fecal coliform measurements that we have to send off to a lab after we, go out in the field and take a grab sample. And then for our industrial toxins monitoring, we test for levels of 1,4-dioxane and PFAS in surface water and in drinking water in areas we are concerned about, such as residents on well water near sludge fields. And as you probably know, sediment is the #1 pollutant in North Carolina. So we have a program completely dedicated to it. This is both volunteer run, and I also go out and sample. So I'm measuring the turbidity of the water in streams, and I also photograph sediment and erosion control violations at construction sites. So then I send these photographs along with the sample data to the state agencies and the local agencies so they can go out and do a real investigation. Lastly, our general inquiry program is monitoring that is brought about by a citizen concern. So a lot of times we'll get a phone call or an email and someone may say, hey, my creek smells a little funny, or they see an oily sheen. And so we go out with the YSI and use other tools that we have available to try and understand what the cause of their concern is. So say you and your volunteers have spent countless hours, collecting all this data. You don't want all that information to go unused. So proper data management is really important to ensure that it can actually be used effectively, whether that's to educate the public or help change regulations. Having your data in a format that is clean and is easily understood is essential, as Adam was saying. Good data management also ensures consistency of this data. For example, a single site only has one name in one location, or that all the temperature data is in the same units. So managing your data correctly also makes sure your data is more trustworthy. If people know your data is accurate and reliable, they can trust it. So how can we manage our data effectively? For nonprofits and smaller organizations, this can be a challenge. When I first started, the data was in a bunch of different Google Sheets in several different formats, basically a mix of all the non-standard data formats Adam showed us. This made it really hard to combine and analyze the data. So I actually spent, I think it was a couple months just going through all of the data, putting it into one spreadsheet, making sure each site had just one name and one set of coordinates. So now, so we don't run into that problem, we use Google Forms to streamline things. So using Google Forms, it automatically takes that data that you input and puts them into a spreadsheet. And the Google form makes sure we're consistent with those site names and locations. As you can see here, I have a screenshot of that, and you just click the site. You're not manually writing it out, so you can't have it in different formats. And same with the date. So we're making sure that we don't have slashes for our dates and backslashes in some places. The use of the Google form makes sure that our data is in the same format no matter what parameter we're using. It's important for our goal, like Adam was saying, we need to marry all the different types of data we are collecting to get the full picture of water quality in the watershed. And again, this data is in that tidy format. We have the form for sampling that Emily and I, the Harbor Keeper, use, and we have a similar but a little bit different form for our River Watch monitoring program. Using a form for our volunteer monitoring can be an essential tool to make sure our data is consistent. We want to make sure that all of our volunteers are entering the data the same, and this spreadsheet makes it so that's true. And I also make most of the questions required so that the teams don't accidentally forget something. And using the form also makes sure that they get an email confirmation so they know that we got their data. So also using the Google Forms, the data is automatically put into a spreadsheet that you can use to share with others or to create data visualizations. And then having your data in the cloud can also minimize data loss that can happen from just having it on your physical sheet. It can get filed away in a cabinet and lost forever. Or if it's just on your personal computer, if something happens to that, the data could be gone forever. And one of the biggest benefits of this data management style is that it's pretty free, it's low cost. There's not a lot of advanced data management knowledge for entering the data into these forms. However, it can't do everything effectively, such as the metadata management. This would require either us adding a bunch of different questions to our form or having a full third spreadsheet that we would have to marry with the others and perform joins, and you would have to have knowledge in something like R to do that. So here are some examples of how we visualize the data. And so we can use the data we collect to store and educate the public on water quality issues. So on the left, we're looking at the makeup of trash collected in our trash traps. So these are structures that we put in the stream, and all the floating trash gets stopped by these metal cages. And our volunteers go in and they take all the pieces out and they count them. And so when we take a closer look at our data, we can see that most of these pieces are styrofoam. And secondly, we have our hard plastic. So those are things like water bottles. And we can use this data to inform the public and also to prove that we have a lot of trash in our watershed, and a lot of it is plastic and glass bottles. And we can try and work towards things such as a bottle bill. We can also use visualization tools like R and ArcGIS to show case information about our watershed. So on the right, we can see the proportion of streams that have poor macroinvertebrate scores and that they're more likely to be in urban areas. This visualization can help showcase the impact of impervious surfaces and other urban pollutants on aquatic life. We can also use these visualizations to talk to the public officials and explain the importance of things like green infrastructures and TMDLs. So this is an example of recent monitoring that we did. We can see the results of tracking E. coli sources in Big Troublesome Creek. This started as a general inquiry about E. coli levels in Lake Reedsville. We first sampled all the tributaries leading into the lake, and this narrowed it down to Big Troublesome Creek. We then did DNA testing to see what the source of E. coli was, and it came back to be human, which didn't really narrow it down much for us. So then we sampled at most of the bridge crossings along the waterway, and all the way to Stokesdale. And then based on the results, we can see that the source is in Stokesdale. So the arrow is showing you the direction that the water is moving towards Lake Reedsville, and the darker red shown right here is the highest level that we saw. And we had to pause this monitoring because the drought we were having this summer, but hope to continue in the winter and fall. But being able to showcase our data like this and send it to the county officials was very helpful. And we hope it will be helpful in the future. And then another way that we can visualize our data, I'm just going to go ahead and click on this because it takes it a second to load. Let me know if you can see this all right.
I see your HRA data.
The website? Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
This is how we make our data publicly available. This was created using an R Shiny app, which is just a package in R. The cool thing about this is it's connected directly to those Google Sheets and those Google Forms I was talking about. So as soon as a new form comes in, that data immediately shows up here. So the first thing on the app is we'll see we have a map, and all the different project types that I was talking about are on this side, and you can deselect and select to look at where they're located, and the map is kind of interactive. You can go and zoom in, and if you hover over them, they'll give you a site name. And the colors also coordinate to what the project type is or what we monitor most often for there. Then as we scroll down, we have our interactive plots. So the red line indicates what the water quality standard is for that parameter. And then you're able to select a date range that you're interested in and the site. So it automatically comes up with all of them selected. And if we just deselect all, and then we'll pick Glencoe, which is one of our swim guide sites, you can see each of the swim guide seasons. And if we go to E. coli, the bottom, you can see that this past swim guide season, it failed a couple times. And then at the very end, this is where the public can download all of the data we have available. You can select the date range you're interested in and what sites that you want to download. So that's a pretty cool tool that we're able to use because of the way we manage our data. And then, so another way we make our data publicly available is through our annual report, which is called the State of the Haw. We not only use our data, but we use USGS data, NCDEQ data to get a complete picture of the health of our watershed. And we take this report to libraries and we share it with the public through presentations and discussions of what's going on and what's been going on the past year. And we also send this report to representatives in the watershed to let them know what's going on. So that's how we manage our data and how we use our data. This is my contact information. If you have any questions, I'm happy to share the code that I used to create that and talk further about how we manage our data. And thank you. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Caitlin. That was really interesting, and I love your slides. Any questions, reactions for Caitlin?
I have one question, Caitlin. You say you guys monitor your PFAS. Do you guys do that in-house or do you use a third party?
We have a third party, and
Okay.
it depends on if we're doing cyclopure or we're sending it out to a lab. It depends on what the reasoning for sampling is and what the end goal is.
Okay. I might ask you, what's your third party? I'm looking at PFAS and we're trying to find a place. So
Yeah, I'm happy to chat with you.
Right, yeah, and we actually, the Aquatic Data Hub has a monitoring guide that's on our website, and we are in the process of making some updates to that, and we want to put in a little section on PFAS, so to come, hopefully in the near future, the guide will be updated with some of that information on our website. So good question, Angela. Let's see. A big fan of HRA in the chat here. We do have time for another question or two if there's anyone else.
I use ArcGIS for all of the maps that I make to share with people, but on the web app that you were seeing, that's Leaflet with an R.
Leaflet with an R, okay. And I heard you mention Shiny as an app you used for displaying data as well.
Yes, that's a package also within R. You can do almost everything you would want to do in ArcGIS in R. It's just harder to visualize it as immediately.
Right. Okay. Great. Well, thank you. Caitlin will be with us till the end of the webinar. Oh, whoop, there's a question. Is the Muddy Water Watch app still active? Can't find it in the stores.
We haven't been using it as often recently or since I've been here, so I'm not sure if it's still active. We've been having trainings, and so people just report it directly to us or to the representatives who would be in charge of that.
Yeah, I think there's different options depending on your municipality too. Like in my municipality, I can report erosion control issues using C-Click Fix. Let some municipalities use that. That's what City of Raleigh uses, but there's different. You can look at your municipality and see if there's a particular way to report as well. Let's see, anything else in the chat? That's it for the chat. Okay, thank you, Caitlin. Appreciate it. All right, we're gonna move on to George Santucci, sustainability with Town of Boone and formerly New River Conservancy. And George is gonna talk about our database. So take it away, George. I can see your screen with the database.
Excellent. Thank you, Christy. I want to be very clear when Adam mentioned talented people managing data, you just heard from one. Caitlin has a wonderful set of skills that are not common amongst NGOs or nonprofit organizations to have the ability to do what she does. So, but she does a spectacular job. So just making that connection to that reference that Adam talked about earlier. But we are here to talk about the database, as he mentioned earlier too. So this is effectively what it looks like. And as Adam said, this is built on Microsoft Access. And it's built on Microsoft Access for some of the reasons that Adam alluded to. So Access, Microsoft makes their products really cheap for nonprofits. I think, subscriptions are almost nothing. I can't remember. I've been out of the nonprofit world for some time now, so I'm forgetting on what their current subscription rate is for MS Office. You do have to buy the standalone Office package. Access is not available in the Online 365 subscription version for the reasons that Adam mentioned. So to build a database in the cloud, you need to use some really sophisticated software, and Access is not designed to do that. Microsoft has threatened to move Access to the cloud, and we keep hoping and waiting for that to happen, but it has not yet happened yet. So we continue to use the desktop version. So I just want to be clear about all that. But the beauty of this database, and the reason we developed this database, is to do all that metadata management for you that Adam talked about earlier, to make sure that your data has all the integrity that it needs. So a researcher at a university or at a government agency, when they pull up your data off of either WQX or you share it with them directly, they know how that data was collected. They know the protocols that were used to collect that data. They know all the parameters, and all that data is all connected. So I'm just going to go through bit by bit in the database just to show you that breadth of how the database does what it does. So we can start right here. So I should say, so I used to be the director of New River Conservancy. So I am using New River Conservancy as the example here. I have a copy of their database. And so what you'll see in here is New River Conservancy's data and information from their New River Water Watchers program. And there's another program called the North Carolina Basin Coalition that is no longer active, but was a program NRC managed. And I would also say, just to, so NRC does function in 3 states. So they use, just like Caitlin does, the Google platform and a Google data form for their monitors to enter their data. So that doesn't, regardless of whether they're in West Virginia, Virginia, or North Carolina, they can enter the data, and it all comes back to one single Google spreadsheet that John Copeland, who's on the call right now, is their overall program manager for that program. And so he can then see that data, QA that data, and continue to use that data and get it into this database. And he's also working with the EPA, Adam, sorry, at the EPA to get the Conservancy's data up into WQX. So sorry, let me go back to the main menu. So you start with the organization. So you put in your organizational data, and it's not extensive, but it at least has all the contact information. Still has me in this particular copy of the database. That needs to change, but I have an old copy of their database just to share with you, just to show you the data that can be put in here. So you can start with your organization. That's one piece of metadata. And then if you were going to add an organization, this is what the data entry form is to add your organization. If you have a WQX organizational ID, you can put that in here. And again, that travels with all your data. So people know, they go on WQX and they're looking for your data, they know your organizational ID right there. And they don't have to worry about misspelling New River Conservancy or some other such thing. Sorry. Forgive me, my office is downtown and very close to a firehouse, so you'll hear sirens. Oops.
You can hit yes there.
Yeah. There we go. Then there's the people tab. So another really important part of metadata is who's doing what, and who's collecting data, who's a volunteer, who's staff, who's what roles do the people play in your organization. And then when the data is collected, and their name is associated with that data, you know what kind of person that was. If they were a volunteer in your program, if they were a paid consultant, so if you do this drop down here, you can see the different categories that we have currently in the database. And so you can modify and change who the roles of each of these people in the database. All right, and then Caitlin mentioned labs, and folks were asking questions about the lab, but you can put your labs in here. You can enter what the lab is, what their certification is, and all kinds of information about the lab. So that information also travels with your data. Okay, and then well, let me some other nice things in here. So this HUC 12 information will, you know, you can make it specific to your watershed. So you can have all these, all the HUC numbers follow your data as well. So this isn't completely filled out right now. It was filled out for the data that's in this database. And so each of these sub watersheds in the New River are what's in this database right now. And so all these HUC numbers follow that data as well. So if a station ID is in one of those HUCs, then that information will travel with your data. And then this is an interesting one, and it may be more applicable to the state and federal agencies or other researchers who are looking to understand better characteristics of the watershed that you're working in. So these ecoregions are pre-populated for you. You don't have to come look this up or anything. It automatically knows based on geolocation which ecoregion and subregion and characteristics of that region, whether it's Piedmont or Appalachian or coastal plain, all that data gets attached to those sites. So then you may, if your program, as Caitlin pointed out, I can't remember if it was 5 or 6, she has 5 or 6 different water quality monitoring programs that the Haw River Assembly manages. So we call those projects in this database. So here you can see, I mentioned New River Conservancy has, or at the time I was there, had 2 different programs. So the Water Watchers was the primary program. That was a volunteer water quality monitoring program. It was throughout the whole watershed. And then the New River Basin Coalition was a North Carolina-based program that was a partnership with the DEQ to look at water quality in the North Carolina New River Basin. And so those are the 2 programs that are in here, but you know, this can manage however many projects you have. And again, the different types of data that you might enter along with that. Importantly, it mentions whether you have an SOP, a standard operating procedures document, and it allows you to put the name of that document in here, the date that that document was implemented, and furthermore, if you have a QApp associated with a project and what that is and what the name of that QApp is and when that was approved, when it was started. So that's critical data for state and federal agencies and could be for others, other researchers as well. They're going to want to know, again, if you have a functioning QApp and you follow that QApp, that just adds a lot more authority to your data. QApp is a Quality Assurance Program Plan. Sorry, too many acronyms. All right. And then we, of course, have a standard data entry form if you want to add projects, to the database. And you can enter things like your QA/QC manager, the primary investigator, all kinds of different, there's a lot of metadata that can be captured and travel with your data throughout by using this database. All right, so then you have your projects now entered. Now you want to do your stations. So these are all the stations that were entered in by New River Conservancy at the time I had this database. And so you got station IDs, you have station names, and when I'll show you when you enter the data, these are all drop downs, right? Like Caitlin showed on her Google form. So nobody's typing this information in. It's all chosen, selected from drop forms. And then once you select young branch, all this other metadata, so the latitude and longitude, all these other things, the ecoregion is already pre-entered, the county that it's in is already pre-entered. The HUCs, there's your HUC 12 that's already pre-entered. If it has an NC assessment unit, we could start to capture that information. So there's all kinds of other metadata that could be entered along to associate with that site, that particular site, that collection site. And again, I'll just show you the data entry form for a station. The really cool thing is it's got this confirm capability. So if you enter a latitude and longitude, and let's say you forgot to put the negative in front of it, you do the confirm location with Google Maps, and it'll pull up a Google map and it'll show you your site over in Asia somewhere, and you're like, oh, whoops, and you're gonna go back and change the latitude number or longitude number to have the right to put the negative sign in front of the longitudinal number. But again, it just further confirms, and it could be that a couple of numbers got transposed when you typed it in. It's not at that bridge that crosses that creek. So you can, this is always to QA your data and make sure that you're entering this information correctly prior to trying to share or upload your data to CAM or to the EPA for sharing. So again, all these different ways to build in and make sure your data is correct. This is another critical piece. So this, again, Adam referenced. So this is where you can set all your defaults for your protocols. So whatever data you're collecting. So in this case, New River Conservancy uses a SECI disk for turbidity monitoring. So we have this device, often in a lake or something like that, you have a SECI disk tied to a string, and you drop it down and you measure how many feet down you can see it. Well, we're typically measuring in really small streams, wadable streams that might be ankle deep. So the better way is to take water out using some kind of a scooping device, a bucket or something, pour it into this long tube that has a SECI disc at the bottom that has centimeter measurements all along it, and you that's how you judge your measurement of the turbidity. And so as you can see, the units are centimeters. And so, and then all of this, every time a New River Water Watcher data is entered in here, it knows, because our SOP says these are the protocols, these are the parameters, and these are the units of measure that we use. So all that data just automatically gets put in along with that data. And you can do, you can change the program over here. It can either be the Water Watchers or the Basin Coalition for NRC. Again, for Caitlin, it could be any one of those 6 programs that she's managing. And then, of course, the sampling events. So this is where the data gets put in. And again, you see the program, you see the station ID, you see the date. And of course, all of this is standardized. Again, they mentioned about, whether you use slashes or dashes for dates. All this stuff is all the project ID. The WQX project ID, as I mentioned, for this project is just NRWW. And so, and then you add the station ID to the project ID, and you get that combined name right there. And then there's all these export formats that are possible from this database. So Adam sort of mentioned this. So if you wanted to send it up to Adam at WQX, you hit that button, it'll export all that data in a format that WQX can take. If you want to just export it to a spreadsheet, and Caitlin wants to grab her R script and pull all that data out of there to do the data visualization she's doing, you just hit that button, export it all to the spreadsheet, and she can run her R script and do all the cool things that she's doing. And then CAM asks us for a specific format for data to be submitted to DEQ here in North Carolina. So we've tailored this export to meet his needs and give him the data in a format that he wants. So it's easily imported into the system there for the state. So that's what that export button will do. And then of course, the final button here is your your quality assurance, right? So whoever is your quality assurance manager is reviewing all this data. And if they reviewed it, everything is cool, they agree it's all valid data, they hit this mark as final, and then you know that that data has been quality assured and quality proofed. So that's all the functionality around data collection, specific data collection per day per site. And then again, if you're adding, that was to look at the data. If you're adding data, this would be the data entry form. So you can pick a creek, you can pick a station ID, do your organization, and a project. We'll just we'll make up a date. And then it pulls up the additional info. So it pre-populates all this metadata in here. And then you can go from here to do your event details. So you can do the time, who actually collected the data. And we actually, so we have some travel time and some other information you may want to track for your volunteer monitoring program. If you have grant monies or you're just trying to assess how many volunteer hours are as part of your program for stakeholder input and for match to grants, you can put that information all in here. And then there's sample types. So you can select from all these different types of, so whether it's macro or grab samples or field-based water quality, whatever's being done that day, you choose those different, that type of, what type of data was collected. We have a standardized field visual survey in here. And if you go to the North Carolina Aquatic Data Hub's methods manual, you will see in there the form. You can print out the form out of the methods manual that shows you what the visual survey, form looks like. So you can just print that out, take it out in the field. And then these checkboxes all mimic the form. So you're just copying and pasting from the form onto this, this form. And there's a habitat assessment, same thing. That form is also in the methods manual. You can print it out, take it out in the field, do your assessment, and enter it into here with the values that you calculate on that form. And then the water quality stuff, which may be the most familiar to everybody. So again, it's all what I showed you earlier that was already pre-programmed into the database, all the methodology, the parameter, the units, and then the actual value that was collected that day, and the method. And so tiers, we talked about tiers in the last training a month ago. But again, tier 1 through 3, whether it's really simple data or if it's a data with a QApp, would be tier 2, which is the water watcher data. So you can see tier 2 throughout this, and then some are tier 3. So that's a QApp with a higher with a monitoring device that has a high level of very low tolerance or high. So then, of course, it could be grab samples. So in this case, we collected E. coli sampling, but we just took a vial out, collected the water, put it in a cold pack device, and sent it off to a lab. Oh no, sorry, we used our EasyGel ColoScan protocol on this one. I'm sorry. So yeah, it's still kept cold in a cooler, and then taken home and used this EasyGel ColoScan. And we didn't do any macro. Oh, we did do macro on this. The data wasn't really entered on this particular site, but anyway. But the point is you can do macroinvertebrates too. So if all these things were done at this site on this day, you can enter all that information right here. And then we have the same export capability on the main page as well. This right here, that's still in gray, is something that's being developed. We're 89.9% done with this. Adam is going to talk a little bit more in a minute about the protocol that we're going to use. We're actually so grateful that Adam has now moved from the nonprofit world to the EPA, and we've been blown away by what the EPA has invested in with WQX and the water quality portal, and they've made our lives a whole lot easier, because trying to migrate data. So if you're a really mature organization that has 20 years worth of data and you want to put it into this database, we did not have an easy way for you to do that. This database was developed for data to be entered manually one by one, which is not the way many organizations, as I just mentioned, the Haw River and New River Conservancy, don't function that way. You really want to do batch upload data even on a monthly or quarterly basis for those organizations, because they're collecting data from their monitors all over the watershed via the Google Forms, and then they have a Google spreadsheet. And so you want to be able to import that Google spreadsheet into this database, so then all this other metadata gets attached to that daily collection or monthly collection of data that's going on at those sites. And so Adam will be able to talk a little bit more about how that works, but it does require some manual manipulation, and it will require an organization to work with Adam directly so he can better understand your data. And actually, I was going to share one other thing with y'all to kind of help. Let me just change my screen here. So, Caitlin already alluded to this. Let me go back one. Hold on one second. All right. So, John, forgive me. I am going to expose some things about NRC in the background here, but this is how complicated programs like this get. So this is New River Conservancy's Google folders for their Water Watcher program, and you can see how many dang folders are in here and all the different metadata. So you got the equipment and the data up to date and the unchecked data, and it's just a lot of data sheets, right? And again, that database that I just shared with you puts it all in one place. So you're not trying to manage all this stuff out of multiple programs. And then again, I'll just share. So this is what their data looks like after their monitors enter the data into those Google Forms. So this is that flat format that Adam talked about. It's a single event on January 12th of 2010, and then all the information just goes across linearly throughout this database. And so once it gets into the NCADH database, all the metadata, which some of it is actually captured here. We've got the ecoregion in here anyway. But all that other data about the tools that were used, the methods that were used, all that metadata then is all managed in the database and attaches, instead of having to manage 10 spreadsheets of all that kind of information, and then trying to figure out ways to link all that information together, writing R script or some other programming tool. And so, what I would say is that's my high level overview of what we have. I'm going to turn it over to Adam, and he's going to show you some of the tools that the EPA have available to you, and we'll talk a little bit about importing data, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you have. Let me change back to the database screen, so if there are questions about that, but that's it, Christy.
George, you had one question in there about macroinvertebrate habitat assessment. The currently, like, North Carolina is not supported in the database. She wanted you to touch on that, and I will say you can do a raw. So for macroinvertebrates, we had a couple of specific protocols that we program into this database, and then there's kind of a open raw macroinvertebrate entry form, which is just counts and names, so that can kind of work for tier 3. What this isn't going to do is calculate the specific way that North Carolina captures and rolls up their macroinvertebrate information, which is more complex than a lot of programs. So a hard thing to accomplish in this database. So that's some additional functionality that we hope to be able to add one day to support folks that are out there collecting that data.
Yeah, and
George,
just, I was just
Oh,
gonna
go
say, just to reiterate what you said there, Adam, I mean, so it can collect the tier 3 data, it just can't do the math to calculate it. But if you're paying a lab or a consultant to do all that for you and you have the numbers, you can enter those numbers in here. It'll manage all that for you. It just won't do the automatic calculation. Because there was some protocol changes that the state was doing too, so we didn't know exactly, and probably we just need to circle back with Cam and get all that information, and we may be able to then add that protocol, that calculation to the database. I'm sorry, and Adam, what was the other question?
I think that was the only question I saw in there. I was just going to
Okay.
ask if you can stop your share, and I'll bring up mine.
Okay, we'll do it.
Any other questions coming up for George as Adam's pulling up his screen? Okay, feel free to drop questions in the chat as they come up. Thank you again, George. And Adam, we'll turn it back to you.
All right. So we touched on kind of WQX water quality portal, how's my waterway, a fair bit in the first one of these. So I'm not going to go in too deep, but just kind of build on what we talked about, and especially talk about how we can use WQX to help you onboard data to NCADH as well. So real quick, again, what is WQX? It's just a standard data model for sharing water quality data, makes everybody use the same fields, the same names, so that we can roll up data in a standardized way across hundreds of different folks that are out there monitoring thousands of programs, really. And that way we can ask really big questions. We can put everybody's data together and join forces to describe the water resources across the country. So it's a very powerful tool. It just defines a common data model for documenting water quality data of almost all types. So if it's habitat, it's fisheries, it's tissue data, it's toxicology information, the chemical information. It connects out to a lot of big databases, like where the taxonomic data is stored, where the chemical names are stored, and integrates all that information. For a long time, it was just the standard, and it was like, good luck trying to achieve it because it's complicated. But in 2017, WQX Web was released, and that's an online web application that helps people prepare their data sets. And it's designed to be flexible, approachable, customizable, so that you can automate submissions and largely leave your data the way it is. When we tried to tell people how to manage their data, that was largely a failure, right? Not everyone can use the same tool to manage their data, right? We just have too many specific needs. And so we don't tell you how to manage your data, but if you want to share it, we tell you what it needs to look like. So, the technology of your system doesn't matter as long as you can map your data to WQX fields and names. And we have many different ways to get data onto WQX, everything from manual Excel templates that you can adopt for maybe a new program or do some manual data rearrangement to custom imports. So leave your data exactly the way it looks and teach WQX Web how to read yours in, and automated exchanges. So if you can produce the full WQX format, you can submit that data directly or work with our API, an application programming interface that is on the WQX Web application, so that you can actually send instructions and do all the imports and submittals directly from your system. So a couple different ways to get there. This is what that kind of looks like. Again, we got the templates for the DIYers, manually reformatting, custom imports, and we have the API, the application programming interface, to build those modern client-side solutions, and the good old-fashioned exchange network for sharing a WQX formatted file directly. This is what it looks like. Almost all the tools are packaged into this WQX Web application. So that's really the one that we're going to be talking about. And the big strength are our import configurations. So this is where you can leave your data looking exactly like the New River Water Watch, the Google form, the Google sheet that it produces. We have a custom import configuration ready to go. John's been out of town, I've been out of town, so we haven't been able to touch base again, but it's ready. So when John and I can reconnect again, we're going to be able to upload all of New River Conservancy's data up to WQX. Couple different things, you can identify your different data set and your file type. You can add all sorts of generated values into your data set that aren't there, or you can do a bunch of if-then statements and translations. And, if I call it DO in my database, not oxygen comma dissolved. So this is where you can teach it column by column, piece of information by piece of information, how to translate your data into the WQX standard. And again, we have contractor support. You don't necessarily have to learn how to do this yourself. You can reach out to us and get some support building your custom import configuration. And then after that time, all you got to do is pull it up and import your data, as long as the structure of your data set hasn't changed. And if you start changing what your data looks like, then your import configuration will no longer work. But get this set up one time and then continue to submit data. I'm really glad that we have Sergio and Alabama Water Watch on the call. That was a bit of a surprise, but this is what their data set looked like. They came to us with 30 years worth of data almost, and data in a tidy format, very similar to what we saw from Haw River and New River Conservancy. And this was a lot of data. Sergio and I played a little bit of email tag for almost 6 months because I was out on parental leave in and out for a while. But we eventually, got them organized, and we got the custom import configuration built, and we onboarded almost 30 years worth of Alabama Water Watch data without them having to go back and change anything about that 30 years worth of data. We could take it exactly the way it is and teach WQX to read it that way. And then since then, they've been able to make additional submissions as time allows. So this is the same functionality that we're going to take advantage of for anybody who wants to adopt the North Carolina Aquatic Data Hub, for them to do a big batch import, right? Because you don't want to take 20 years worth of data and hand enter it into that database. And we don't want to redevelop a sophisticated tool within the database that can teach, that can allow it to be taught what your data set looks like and rearrange that formatting on the fly. We could do it, but that would be replicating the functionality that we already have in WQX Web, functionality that we've been developing out for a number of years. So if you have a data set like this, you want to get it into either WQX or the North Carolina Aquatic Hub database and start managing it yourself there directly, you can come to us at EPA at the WQX help desk, share your data set with us. We're going to help you get an import configuration that will take this data and put it into the WQX format. And then at that point, you can either choose to share it up to WQX in the water quality portal, or you can say, just export this out back to me, because I'm going to go take this and upload it now into the North Carolina Aquatic Data Hub database. And the reason that works is because the North Carolina Aquatic Data Hub was built on top of the WQX standard. So it basically is helping you get data directly into the WQX standard, and it can recognize it. A batch import from the WQX standard is going to be really easy to set up in the Aquatic Data Hub database versus us having to program that access database to recognize everyone's different data sets. So we're going to rely on the WQX web capabilities to do big batch imports and big batch data manipulations. And again, when you do that, when you put your data in WQX, you get the water quality portal, which I think is the real major incentive for doing this. WQX is just the data standard. It takes data in. Water quality portal is the data warehouse that can then serve data back out. So it can power our Shiny applications or ARC Online maps or dashboards directly. So as you continue to submit new data, your projects can get automatically updated. The same way that, say, the Haw River was showing us that as new data goes into their Google Sheets, it's going to show up in their Shiny apps. They're doing that all on their own. But if you upload data to WQX, you get the power of the portal to be able to do that for you as well. Again, serves data from over 1,600 organizations now, 430 million records from over 1.5 million sites. And it's got a nice user interface that you can query your data back. And it has web services that can power things like this map that I put together for the last talk to show all the data that we have across the state of North Carolina. So same thing, if you want to just zoom in on your watershed and share all the data that's being collected across federal partners, state partners, county partners, local governments, watershed organizations, all of that data can be integrated together. You can get the big picture for what's known about your watershed. There's a growing number of internal, external tools being built on top of this primary data source because there's a number of ways to retrieve it. So again, you can get it from the Water Quality Portal website. We have TADA, which is tools for automated data analysis. That's a suite of R packages and an R Shiny application that helps you use and process and harmonize data that's been contributed to the Water Quality Portal, use it in analysis and assessments. And then How's My Waterway is our EPA public water information viewer. It assembles and integrates data from a number of systems and gives you a complete picture of what we know about water resources in your watershed, whether it's drinking water or surface water, biological information, assessment information. We recently added an extreme weather tab. So if you want to see what kind of extreme weather is happening in your watershed, you can see that as well. It's going to show you cyanobacteria, satellite observations, everything that we can fit in there, really. And it talks to the Water Quality Portal, so you can view data directly there and query it and download it directly from How's My Waterway. Water Quality Portal produces web services, which is how we pipe this data into all these different applications. Very simply, you can just copy that second little box there. That's a URL with all the instructions of what you've put into the Water Quality Portal to build a data set, and then that data set will always live at the end of that URL. And you can copy that URL and put it in Excel, or you can put it in Google Sheets, or you can put it in R, or you can put it in Arc Online. And because it's a standardized data format, all of those programs are going to be able to recognize, import, and read that data so that you can build projects and applications. Like this is a dashboard I recently built to look at harmful algal bloom toxins that have been collected across the country. And so you can explore this data, see what's been collected, see where toxins have been found above certain criteria. So this is very powerful to have a relational database that you can query live in the cloud and can integrate with other systems. So it's a major incentive to sharing the data up there. This is what How's My Waterway looks like. This is how it shows you the water quality monitoring data. So you can zoom in on your local watershed. You can add the Water Quality Portal sites so we can see those purple sites show up with all the information that's been collected there. You can zoom into an individual site and get time series plots of all the data that's been collected and downloaded directly from those sites as well. And these pages are easily integratable with Arc Online as well. So you can build yourself a nice little dashboard map app about your program and take advantage of all these plots right off the bat. So a lot of incentives that they just keep coming out. These things weren't in place a couple years ago. So really getting data to WQX was kind of just a burden with not much payoff. But in the last few years, there's a lot of payoff to getting your data there if you know how to take advantage of some of these services. And again, all this integrates with the monitoring and the data management and the use of data that we're working on in every state, really, not only just North Carolina. So it's a good idea to work on getting your data shared up to these systems. And that's it for me. I've got my email address there, and I've got our WQX Help Desk email address there. If you want to reach out to either of those, you can get to me and links to our primary data systems.
Thank you, Adam. So we have a few minutes left for any questions or reactions that you have. Like maybe has this spurred any thoughts for your own water quality monitoring or aspirations for water quality monitoring? We'd love to hear them.
I can say on my end as an educator, just starting to join and have students learning about the best way to collect the data. Thank you, Adam, because we do separate ours by semester to semester. So I was like, ooh. And so I'm trying to find somebody who can put all that together. So I was laughing when you said, I'm like, he must already looked at our data, our data. And Caitlin, I like everybody's, it was really, great to hear, especially when I'm starting in this world. This is my second year. So knowing that I'm not starting from scratch, that there's people out there and there's data that we could be used. I think this is really great. Thanks.
Angela, that brings up a good point. Christy, we should make sure everybody here knows they're welcome to join us for our monthly calls. And we have a community built around all this stuff. Adam attends these meetings regularly. Caitlin and I all attend, Christy, of course, and Angela. So we welcome you all to join us. We'll grow in strength if we grow this community. Chrissy, I guess you could, I don't know, what's the best, should they email you to get on the listserv so you can alert them to when these meetings are?
Yeah. So we do want to expand and make these monthly meetings available for really anyone who wants to drop in and share, ask questions. It's a peer network, really. We have a listserv and we are getting more into using it. We haven't used it much, but I am just going to go ahead and subscribe people who registered for these 2 workshops on this listserv. So you're going to automatically get on our listserv and we'll start sending out notices of those Zoom meetings. If you don't want to be on the listserv, you can send me an email or you'll be able to get yourself off of it very easily. It's a Google group, so it's not that complicated. I do see a question, have we collaborated with other countries? And not yet, but we found this peer network, even though it's been starting off kind of small, like George referred, it's really just people getting together and sharing what they're going through, the challenges they're having, the successes they're having. So it's a good opportunity just to kind of touch base and learn what's going on there. And I want to refer back to what Adam said at the very beginning, that all data has value, but documented data has more and shared data has even more. So like, that's what we're all about, is trying to figure out how to document and share and use this data. Let's see, there's a question that came in on the chat. Can these databases be used for wetland monitoring data? Is it primarily for stream data?
Yeah, I can answer that.
Go ahead.
No reason why you can't put wetland monitoring data into this. Sometimes, instead of linear transect, they've got some other ways of doing that. But within the WQX model, definitely, like for instance, the national wetland and coastal and condition assessment that is done across all 50 states as part of that EPA national program, that data all goes into WQX in the portal. So there's nothing necessarily structurally different about wetland data that we can't put into the WQX format. It's all still water data in the end. So.
Thank you. There was a comment in the chat about somebody has collected water quality data for 25 years on paper forms, and they're amazed at how far it's come along, and that's great to hear. Okay, let's see. I have a lot of questions about Tier 3 data. Yep, some municipalities with permits are collecting Tier 3 data but haven't submitted it to DEQ. So there's still some conversations going on about how best to do that, so that those gaps are collected in the federal databases. So thanks for bringing that up, Allison.
Yeah, Allison, I think, we're just starting on this training stuff. I think there's still more opportunities to really, delve deeper, and maybe we have to work. I'm happy to visit with you and talk more about how you would collect all this information in the NCADH database. And then speaking of that, Christy and I have been emailing back and forth right before this. So before everybody runs, we do have a new iteration of the database coming. Adam, forgive me. Did we finalize the format coming out of WQX that Michael could then build the import protocol, or are we still tweaking that a little bit?
No, yeah, what we gave him should have been fine. Yeah.
Okay.
So but let's touch base again on that one, and we might want to have a separate meeting just to discuss Tier 3 benthic, and let's get a plan.
I think that's a good call. Yeah, I think maybe we should set up a separate training for that tier 3 data. And then, and we might need to do another walkthrough, Christy, on how to import data once we have that final database, once Michael's done building that functionality into the NCADH. And we're going to shoot to have the new database available to you by October 1.
Yep, and I just dropped our website. It's like I said, it's on WRI's web pages. That's where we're gonna put all our stuff. So check back there. I will send, we'll send an email out to the listserv once that is posted for download. And it sounds like another webinar is gonna be in the works for some of those functions, to share some of those functions. And if you go in and get this database at the end of the month, October 1st, and start poking through it and wondering how to upload your own data, you could come to the next webinar with questions about that, and we'll answer those questions for you. So, all right, we are at the end of our webinar. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to our speakers. And yeah, have a great weekend.